Thanks for choosing to listen to this Late Night Linux Family podcast. We're only able to do this because of the people who support us. None of our shows are paywalled, but our Patreon supporters can get most episodes early and never hear any ads. Learn more at latenightlinux.com/support or support us by telling a friend or colleague about everything we do. Hello and welcome to episode 126 of Linux After Dark. I'm Joe.
I'm Chris.
And I'm May.
Welcome back all. No Gary this time, he's a bit under the weather, but we're going to soldier on without him. Something occurred to you recently, Chris, about technologies that are effectively dead.
Yeah, so recently I was helping my mother get a new internet provider and I realised that copper phone lines get switched off next January in the United Kingdom. I decided to clear some things out and realised I had 5 Chromecasts in a drawer that I'd not used. And I suspect that Google, as they do, will kill them. So I sold them all, or they're still worth something. And I just started thinking, I'm now old enough and ugly enough to be living through the death of tech paradigms as a grown adult. And it's quite refreshing in a way that some of that stuff is enforced. When people are losing VDSL, they're saying, I don't want that. But it makes sense to have fiber optics that can carry more bandwidth and less cabling, for example. But when it comes to Linux, free and open source, I feel like quite often the opposite tends to be true. Does anything ever actually truly get deprecated?
I've been saying this for years, and I've been waiting for it to catch on. Software doesn't die. It just gets donated to the Apache Foundation.
Yeah, or just gets forked as the Trinity Desktop or Mate or whatever.
The thing it makes me think is it good or is it bad? Does it help or is it not actually as good an idea as we think?
Well, you get into the question of churn in software, don't you? Like, developers always want to do new shit. And, you know, it's the 80-20 rule, isn't it? Like, to get 80% of the way there on a new project is relatively quite straightforward. The last 20% is really difficult because that's all the hard details and the polishing of bugs and everything. And software developers, especially those who are doing it as a hobby, are not really interested in finishing things necessarily when there's new exciting things that they could be making. And so the result of that is you end up with, you know, new versions of stuff and new protocols, and the old stuff, with it being open source, doesn't die as such. It doesn't disappear, but it gets kind of abandoned almost.
It's tricky because I hear people that espouse this as the main pillar of why they love free and open source software. You know, you can always keep something going. And I get that, but it does also feel sometimes like it would be useful to be able to leave things behind a bit more. I do feel like sometimes it happens not completely, but almost completely. I'm thinking about when ALSA moved to Pulse Audio and then Pulse Audio to Pipewire, and obviously everyone's favorite topic of contention, System D. But largely it has been adopted, and even people that don't necessarily love it can see the value in some of its features, even if it gets a bit bloated.
Yeah, but even if you're using Pipewire, you've still got ALSA in the mix, haven't you?
Mm.
We just keep building things on top of the last thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm using it on the Debian 13 systems I'm now running Plasma on Fedora. So obviously they're putting Pipewire and all the new shiny things in all the time. And yeah, it's not been a disruptive transition. I don't dare touch this machine we're recording on though, Joe, which still runs Pulse Audio, the same Debian 12 Pulse Audio stack that I always have run on this machine. And I think, as we've discussed before, this particular machine I see as a recording booth appliance, not a daily driver desktop computer as such. So it's a slightly different model. But I do sometimes feel like it might be quite refreshing if there was a kind of VDSL switched off. Chromecasts won't work when you plug them in. This version of macOS does not work anymore. x86 CPUs are not supported by this operating system. There is a refreshing clearance feeling when that happens to a degree. It does tend to make people angry though as well, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, look at 32-bit x86, right? That pissed some people off when it effectively died. And yeah, you can run very much specialist niche distros or whatever. Like I would imagine TinyCore is never going to drop x86 32 or not for many, many, many years. But even Debian now, the modern versions of Debian will not run on a 32-bit x86 CPU.
And as I understand it, Wine and the 32-bit libraries, which were also a point of contention, they're started to converge on a way that is probably, I think, helped by things like the Steam Deck. They're making progress towards less work for the same result and the ability to deprecate without the hard yank. I think it was one of the Ubuntu interim releases where they tried to seed deprecation of 32-bit i386 compatibility libraries ahead of an LTS, and that just didn't work, did it? I mean, it was very unpopular, even with Valve, I think, directly for Steam games. So I think if you catch the window correctly, things do move along, because much as we love our stack of laptops, there surely is a limit even to that in the end.
Joe, I think you just hit that limit the other day, didn't you?
You mean with my Mac Mini?
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried to get Ubuntu installed on my Mac Mini, or Ubuntu, and obviously I could install it fine. This is a 2014 Mac Mini, and Ubuntu installed fine, but I could not get Wi-Fi working. I tried the additional drivers thing and just no joy. I tried a fresh install, ticking the box, saying install Wi-Fi drivers, wouldn't work. I thought, okay, well, maybe this is a 2604 thing. So then I thought, I'll try 2404. That is still supported. Let's just put that on and deal with it later. Even that wouldn't work. And so I had to run a cable round the room behind furniture and stuff to the Mac Mini. And now it's properly wired in, job done. But it was quite frustrating nonetheless.
And I did a bit of digging into why this might be happening. And sadly, even though this is a 12-year-old wireless chip, there's still people finding CVEs in the stack that makes those chips work on Linux. And because 2404 is still a supported LTS release of Ubuntu, that backported CVE patching still has to go into the stack, whether it's for the kernel for 2404 or 2604. So it's tricky. And I can see the point of view if you're trying to maintain a broad range of support and you're looking over to your left and right and thinking, well, hang on a minute. Microsoft over there have said machines from 2018 or older are gone on the latest operating system. And over my other shoulder, there's a kind of rough 8-year life cycle. The chips that a lot of these proprietary, let's not forget, because it's often Broadcom chips and Macs, the chips that we're trying to support are proprietary, not really designed for this operating system, have to be wedged in with DKMS for machines that are 12 years old. It must be quite frustrating in the end to think, can we not just not do this anymore? Because it's really annoying.
Just out of interest, why does having CVEs mean that it doesn't work? Is it that they patched it and that broke stuff?
Regressions, yeah. So they've fixed the security flaw. But of course, this is old Wi-Fi stacks. When you patch CVEs in current Wi-Fi chipsets, a lot of people are using them on a day-to-day basis. You get a lot of bug reports. You're probably able to fix them more widely. Realistically, Joe, how many people do you think are running the Broadcom chips in 2014 Macs compared to Windows 11 era or newer machines, even if they're installing Linux on them? So you still do your due diligence, especially if you're offering, let's say a desktop operating system you're looking to hang an IPO off, for example. You want a good CVE patching record and you want to be visibly addressing security flaws. So yeah, of course, when you patch CVEs, there's always the risk of regressions. And in this day and age, depending on, let's say, which methods you use and which testing you're actually doing on, how many people who actually put these patches into production have a 2014 Mac Mini to actually test it on when they're running their tests. And I think that becomes increasingly hard as the years go by and you keep trying to make these specific proprietary drivers work and follow a good security policy.
Yeah, so sadly, older hardware just falls off.
Developers only have so many hours in the day, right? And so they have to prioritize what they want to work on.
Yeah. And people can be very entitled, unfortunately, I think.
Yeah, exactly. My Mac Mini used to work, now it doesn't work. It's your fault. Well, no, it's Apple's fault for not supporting it when they absolutely could do. It wouldn't necessarily be in their business interest, but there's nothing stopping them continuing to support the latest version of macOS on that Mac Mini.
And let's not forget, specifically with this issue, it's actually Broadcom, because they chose either Atheros or Broadcom back then for the chips. And Atheros was slightly more open. But with Broadcom, you're looking at DKMS, and you always have done. And there was an awful lot of work done at the time because, like Asahi, Apple Silicon is a hotness for a while. People are like, surely there must be a way that we can get this to work. Well, in 2014, 2015, they were the M1s of the day. And Broadcom are absolute bastards. Like, they're up there with Oracle as like the worst companies on planet Earth for this stuff. Look at what Broadcom have done to VMware. Like, it's literally taking what you thought was a perpetual license and turning it into a renewable one. Like, it's so bad, their behavior. And they've never been any different to that, even if you're going back 12 years.
So a lot of Wi-Fi hardware is actually soft Mac, and most of what it actually does is implemented by its firmware, not its driver. The firmware provides you an interface to talk to from the driver. And if Broadcom stops shipping those firmware updates and there's a bug in that firmware, that's stuck. I got into that situation with my old XPS 13, where the Atheros chip that was in it had a bug where it would just blow up sometimes and not work anymore until it rebooted. You just kind of have to deal with those kinds of things.
This is why when we spoke to Mark from Lenovo all that time ago about the Snapdragon laptops and the way that the stack of hardware is working, and you've got these new NVIDIA combined MediaTek ARM SoC discrete GPU things, that's what worries me about that kind of stuff, because you're very much piecing together proprietary blob jigsaw puzzles for that stuff. And you're at the mercy of the hardware bill of materials. And as I said to you, Joe, even in 2014, you couldn't replace those Wi-Fi cards easily on those Mac Minis because they're not standard mini PCIe boards or M.2 NGFF. And now they're soldered to the bloody motherboard. So it's even harder.
I suppose if we're talking about dead tech, we have to talk about X11, don't we?
It is slightly awkwardly kind of the elephant in the room, I guess.
Yeah, you talked about that switch off point, and I think that we are at that point right now, aren't we? Where GNOME and Plasma are properly ripping out X11 support and going Wayland only. And yet the likes of all the other desktops are still supporting X11 for now and applications and everything. But the big two desktop environments have said enough is enough. Wayland is the future. Wayland is the present, in fact, not the future. We are not going to support X11 anymore. And you've got people, the wankers of the world, forking it and moaning about it and being really, really entitled. But developers only have so much time, and they have to pick sometimes, and they have to draw lines. And this is a line that has been drawn, and it is ultimately for the best.
Well, this is it, Joe. You spoke to Campbell Barton a couple of years ago, who works on Blender, and one of the things he explicitly talked about was the challenges that he faced moving from X11, where you could map coordinates on the screen, to Wayland, where everything works differently. And when you listen to the amount of work he's having to do, if you then say to him, oh, yeah, but all that work you were doing on X11, you've got to do that too for all the people that continue to run that display server, you cannot blame him for going, no. Like,
yeah.
A lot of people run GNOME, a lot of people run Plasma. I'm just not going to do that if those projects are going in that direction. Unless you're going to find me someone who puts their hand up and says, I will, this was what I tend to observe. People will put their hand up and go, yeah, I'll do that. But to actually do it. It's the same thing as saying, I will maintain security patches for Python 2 after end of life. It's that energy. But yeah, it absolutely makes no sense. Even if, as the developer, you don't necessarily like Wayland over X11, do you want people to run the software which you write? It's ultimately the dilemma that you face. You're not going to be able to change that fully, I don't think.
That said, though, X-Wayland is a thing, and applications that were written around X11 will still work in Wayland.
It's hard to map where my issues of lay, and I won't talk about this in detail here, maybe we'll talk about it in future, but I've just done a full rug pull going from XFCE 4.20 on Debian Trixie to running literally almost fresh out of the Plasma developers Plasma on Fedora, because they really do track the point releases quite tightly. And it's a fully Wayland session. And when I did this before, I made the mistake of doing it on Debian 12, and being stuck with Plasma 5 with lots of bugs that were really irritating. But this time around, I've not thought about it at all. And so I think it's in a reasonable state of maturity. It's obviously not perfect. I don't do everything that everyone does in a computer. So I'm sure that people are tearing their hair out with various aspects that are yet to be rectified. But much like whether you love it or hate it, Systemd, you can run sysv in it, you can run OpenRC, you can still do all of this stuff. But again, every project that thinks about init systems is unlikely to maintain things for 3 of them at once.
Yeah, you do get distros where you've got a choice of that, but wherever you've got a choice of kind of major components, they're not all going to be equally maintained, are they?
You think about things like Pi-hole or WireGuard if you customize the DNS. The way that it behaves under Systemd Resolved is completely different to older ResolveConf. And you look at issue trackers in GitHub projects, and you can see maintainers, they do struggle with this, because someone will raise an issue and they'll be like, oh, you're the first person we've seen that's raised this issue. What do you run? Oh, I run Void. It's like, okay, well, we're going to have to put a bit of work into this. And, you can get around that and you can change it. But again, it is tricky because it's so intrinsic to so many different parts of the stack. And if you start chasing bug fixing in one direction, you might introduce regressions in the other too. So what are you going to do?
Hope that someone steps up and actually fixes it.
Mm.
Basically. I think that the hard cutoff date for most open source software is just when people stop fixing it. And if that's you're the person who is still fixing it, then you get to choose when it dies, which can be a little terrifying. And people will stand up and say, oh, I'll fix it, and then not do it. But that's not your problem anymore.
It does happen, doesn't it? You see maintainers who say, I'm done, and then they come back.
That too.
Because they try to hand over and say, I don't want to / can't do this anymore. And they think they've got somewhere, but then they'll come back. It's like Godfather 3 syndrome. It's very difficult when a lot of projects have a lot of development history resting on one person. However much they document meticulously, however much the code base is clean, open source, visible, to be able to truly take your hands off and go, I give this to you, and not actually run off to the circus. It doesn't get smoothly handed over. And inevitably, you're still going to want to ask that person, because there'll be something that they'll just be able to pull from the recesses of their mind. Oh yeah, I didn't think to document that because I patched that in 18 years ago. So I just know that that's a thing, but I never wrote it down.
You see the same thing in all kinds of volunteer or otherwise work. We like to think of humans as kind of replaceable cogs and stuff like open source, but they're just not. And the software is as much the people that make it as it is a product of those people. So when we ultimately have people who do pass away, as humans tend to do, the software will eventually go with us.
Yeah, or just people move on with their lives. Ubuntu Mate springs to mind. We've talked about that quite a bit. What is going to happen with that project? People have stepped up and say they are going to maintain it, but are they though? Like, are they really going to do that? I hope so. I really hope so.
It remains to be seen.
Yeah. And if they don't manage it, then I think that's fair enough. You know, it's taking on a massive burden, and hopefully that burden will be manageable. But if it's not, well, then it's just not. And what can you do? Move.
I think ultimately it's no harm, no foul there. People got a bunch of enjoyment out of it. Some of them might have donated back. Some of them probably didn't and just got some free software for a while that worked the way that they wanted. Eventually, I guess we got to move on.
This is the period with all of those flavors that maybe skipped an LTS, where it's a bit of a shock to the system and people have stood up. But then Canonical will turn around and, it's like if a new party gets into a local council. You arrive day one, say, okay, I'm going to do this now. So, okay, who's doing the bins? Who does this? Who does that? Canonical have said there is a beta testing process for an LTS. There is a roadmap, and you have to meet the milestones of dailies, beta, testing, release candidates. And that's the kind of work that Martin would be doing, almost silently, leading up to the release. And it's whether the people take one look at that and go, oh, this is too much work, actually. Or they go, okay, I will truly take on the mantle.
And again, that remains to be seen. We don't want to particularly pick on Ubuntu Mate. It was just a very popular project, especially in the podcasting sphere.
Exactly. And no disrespect or shade to Martin, who is, as you said, May, like all maintainers, free to do what they like. We're not paying customers of Martin Wimpress. We've benefited greatly from his expertise, dedication, and passion in that direction.
Yeah, for many years. And then that expertise was directed in a different direction to something that he's more passionate about now. And there's only so many hours in the day. And it's kind of a prime example of open source developers and maintainers only having so many resources and having to make decisions that are sometimes tricky.
I think to circle this back round to where we started, ultimately, I think it's okay for things to be deprecated. But the great joy of open source is that they don't have to be. And it's finding the middle ground, isn't it? Where you can't always have an immediate reaction of, you've taken away the thing I need that I don't pay for, don't contribute to, don't do anything ever to help in terms of existence. And kind of revel in the fact that quite often things do last a lot longer than you might expect in the Chromecast world, in the VDSL world, in the supported Mac world. But it's not a guarantee or something that should be taken for granted as an expectation.
Yeah. I mean, look at those M1 Macs, right? Like my M1 MacBook Air. That is getting on for 6 years old now. At some point, Apple is going to pull the plug on it and say no more updates, no more major updates, and then eventually no more security fixes. And at that point, I'm not going to feel comfortable running macOS on it, and I'm going to feel a lot more comfortable running Asahi on it. And hopefully Asahi will still be going at that point. And if it is kind of waning, then maybe that will be a shot in the arm for it. When Apple, well, they don't announce it, do they? But when it becomes clear in the kind of Mac and Apple community that the M1 series are being deprecated, there will hopefully be a lot more interest in running Linux on them. And at that point, people will rally around Asahi, hopefully, so that we can still keep running up-to-date software on these Macs. And that is the beauty of open source, that code is out there. And even if the project were to go dormant for a while, it could be picked up again. Whereas your Chromecasts are just going to be e-waste.
And I guess it'll kind of be up to individuals, people who decide whether to work on it or not, which way it goes. It could be that these actually aren't all that important to anyone. An M1 MacBook Air actually isn't worth all that much when they finally die, and people just decide to move on.
Maybe, but I will eke every last bit of life out of that machine. Right, well, on that hoarding note, we should probably get out of here then. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. Until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Chris.
And I've been May.
See you later.